Okay, welcome to another episode of the podcast. Where we are actually recording 2 in one day for the first time ever.
We don't just wear the same clothes day after day.
But the first one, if you didn't see, we wanted to pay tribute to Carl Weathers.
Yep.
And
just didn't feel right to not talk about Carl Weathers.
Right, and we wanted it to have its own thing. We didn't want to blend it in to this one.
Carl Weathers deserves his own.
That's right. Especially because on this one, we're going to be talking about movie villains, and Carl Weathers is a hero. Even when he's playing the opponent to the hero of our story,
he was still likable. Yep.
Yeah, he's no villain. So Carl Weathers deserved his own thing. But as I said, now we wanted to talk about movie villains, and we really didn't decide to give this a particular structure. We decided not to go like draft format or anything.
We're just winging it today.
We just wanted to talk about what makes a great movie villain and who some of our favorite examples of that are in movie history. The one thing that I will point out is my methodology almost always for when we're making these lists or going through to pick certain things is I look through my digital library of movies because I'm like, okay, all my favorite movies in there. Let's just go through and see what it brings to my mind. Get my list from that to start. And as I was looking through, it was like a shocking number of my favorite movies don't have villains in any sort of traditional sense, or if they do, like they don't have great memorable villains or a specific villain. A lot of movies kind of have like a generic like group of bad guys or something.
Right.
And I was like, that surprised me because a good villain seems so like important. Every time a movie has a good villain, it seems so important to that movie's success.
Right.
So to look through and see how many movies don't have
a villain,
that like really stands out, was shocking to me and just made me maybe appreciate more. I mean, now granted, I have a pretty lengthy list of villains, but compare that to all the movies I've seen, it actually doesn't seem like that particularly huge of a list. So. That was just sort of my first thought is a good villain is hard to find.
It is. It's absolutely true. I mean, we both came up with our list, but, so many movies, like you said, they either don't have them or they have a villain and they're just, they're forgettable and they're not memorable. But to me, the villain role is just, so just kind of by nature, the hero typically in a movie, he follows the rules. He's got a moral compass that he doesn't stray, he doesn't let it go too far. And so the villain role can be so fun because, typically a lot of times that's completely out the window. And it turns into like a flashier part or, you don't have to play by the rules and stuff like that. So it opens up a lot of opportunity. I think, you see a lot of really acclaimed performances in movies and they're villains. Because it's just the role you can sink your teeth into more, and it kind of takes the safety nets away a lot of times. Like this is not a spoiler. Like, well, I'm sure we'll talk about this. Like the Joker, where it's just like anything goes, and that comes out in the performance. It jumps out of the screen, and it's just something that you can see a lot of times where it's like you can tell the actor is really enjoying doing this. Something they can really sink their teeth into, like I said, and they're not confined, they're not constrained by my character doesn't break the rules, or my character would never do this. The villain role a lot of times opens itself up to anything goes and just kind of a flashier performance.
Yeah, and the fact that the actor himself doesn't have to like the character.
Yeah.
I think
so that license to just be despicable, if you want.
Right, yeah, you're right. I think it gives a lot of freedom to the actor to just be loose and free with it and be like, if I do something really ridiculous or dumb, that's fine because I'm not trying to redeem this character anyways.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's also kind of interesting too. Like I was thinking backwards, and it seemed like for the longest time, and I think to me it changed kind of around Alan Rickman in Die Hard is when he's the villain where. Like your big star, which Rickman wasn't a big star, but I mean like your bigger stars, they stayed away from the villain roles for the longest time. And like I said, it really feels like around Hans Gruber, he kind of made it cool to be the villain. And you can look after that, and then it's like you get like Anthony Hopkins as Hannibal Lecter, and Rickman does it again in Robin Hood, and you start to see. I really think Hans Gruber opened the door for more actors to be like, you know what, I can be the bad guy, and I can have a lot of fun, and I can get acclaim for that role because he did.
Yeah, and because Hans Gruber was really the first villain that I think people looked at and said he stole the show.
Yeah,
and that's exactly what I think you're talking about. Is
exactly.
Hollywood actors, they have some egos. They go like, I want to be the star. I want to be the person who stands out. And when you see Die Hard and everyone's going, how about that Alan Rickman?
Yep.
Stars are like, well, I want
Okay,
that.
I'll do that.
Give me the part that gets me.
I
the
really
acclaim.
think it changed after that. I think
Yeah.
he really ushered in a new kind of way and a new willingness for actors or actresses to be the bad guy.
Yeah, and you know what? Let's just continue on, because at the top of my list of villains was Hans Gruber. And I think he did. He changed the not format, but the archetype for villains
Mm-hmm.
in movies, because I think before that, villains were mostly it was more of a physical nature. Like the big
Mhm.
bad, the big heavy.
Mm-hmm.
The guy that's intimidating to look at. And Hans Gruber came in and he was like,
He's not intimidating to look at at all.
I'm going to be sophisticated. I'm going to be smart. I'm
He's
going
got
to
a
be
suit
witty.
on.
I'm going to be funny
Yeah.
and charming. Like, charm was just not something that was typically associated
Mm-hmm.
with villains.
No.
And that's what made him a show stealer. Is everybody's just like, man, I know we're not supposed to like this guy, but
I kind of like this guy.
But I kind of like this guy.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's crazy because, like you said, there's not one intimidating thing about Alan Rickman in that movie. But he comes in and he looks cool. He's got this fancy suit on, and you just ask yourself, like, man, why is this performance so memorable? And I also think too, before and he's not literally the first example of this, but it was like a lot of times, like you take like your in the 70s or the 80s, it'd be like Charles Bronson or Chuck Norris or these people doing these action movies. And the bad guy role required zero good acting.
Right.
Zero. Kind of exactly like you said. They're just looking for muscles and intimidation. And I don't think acting, it's like good actor, bad actor, who cares? And then you watch Rickman and it's like, this guy came from the stage and from the theater. And that's what I mean too, where it's like he changed that perception of like, I can have fun with this role and I can have, the spotlight and I can do all these things, but it doesn't mean I have to sacrifice good acting. Like, he's legitimately good in that movie. And, he's not just the muscle guy and you're like, well, he's got muscles, but he certainly doesn't have acting ability. Rickman's got all the acting ability, and he really paved the way to show people, like, you can do the villain role, but you can be a good actor while you're doing it.
Right. And it was, man, Die Hard, I know we've talked about it plenty on this before. It was just a sea change in both ways, because we talked about how it's a change in the action hero to being more of the everyman as opposed to the big burly guys, and the change in the villain in the same way. And it was sort of a mirror thing.
Yep.
Like, that's a very popular trope for the villain to be the mirror opposite
Everything
of
that the hero isn't.
And, either the same but different motivations. You're like Black Panther, where they're both in a panther suit at the end fighting. You either got two versions of the same, or you've got the polar opposites.
Yep.
And in Die Hard, you have sort of the same in that they're both everyday looking guys, and then opposites in that John McClane's this streetwise cop, and Hans Gruber's this really sophisticated criminal.
Yep.
And the clash there is what made it so compelling.
I think it was Die Hard 2 is kind of smart too, because it was like, before that you'd see a lot of the villain type roles. It was like, I want to take over the world, and Hans Gruber's like, I just want money.
Yeah.
Like, I just want to steal some money and go off to a tropical island somewhere. So it's like, I don't know if relatable is the right word, but you're like, yeah. I mean, who doesn't want, it's like, in Die Hard, they're trying to steal like $600 million, I think.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, I want $600 million too.
Yeah, it just felt real.
There you go. And it wasn't like, I just want to conquer the world and take over everything. It was so broad before, and this was like, I'm just stealing some money.
Yeah. If it wasn't broad, it was the most vague thing ever. I mean, I think we both know Cobra. The
like,
joke is
what
like,
are these guys?
who are these people and what is their motivation? They just get together and clang axes.
And then he's like, it's the New World Order. And you're like, what is the New World Order?
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah, Hans Gruber, it was like, look, this guy's got a ton of money. I want to steal it and sneak away.
Yeah, and I can. He kind of had that was
Yeah.
the other thing. It's like, why do I do this? Because I'm great at it. You know,
And
that was
it goes to your
his
thing, like
personality.
smartest guy in the room. Like that characteristic of the villain. You know, it's like some of the Schwarzenegger or Stallone villains, they're just idiots, like just big muscle idiots. And Hans Gruber, it's like his, he doesn't really hardly do anything physical in that movie. He shoots poor Ellis, your guy Ellis, but it's like his power is his intelligence, and it was like it was just a game changer.
Yeah, for sure. All right. So I don't know that I have a great natural pivot from that point. But I'll say this. I made my list, and as I typically do, I sort of, if I see some different categories rising up, and my main big split in this is human villains, more like sci-fi villains.
Yeah. I have a combination of the two.
So maybe let's stick with human villains
Sure.
for the time being, since we started with Hans Gruber, who's the top of my human villains list.
Sure.
And let's talk about a villain who was the opposite of what we're talking about with Hans Gruber, who goes back to the muscles and just looks great, and it kind of connects to our first podcast, Ivan Drago.
Yeah.
The ultimate sports villain.
The ultimate sports villain.
Who just, he looks like if you used modern day AI and said, create me a boxing villain, they would create Ivan Drago.
And even the name. It's like, and also give me the perfect name for a villain. Ivan Drago. Nailed it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is, like we said, perfect look. And
unbelievable.
The fact that maybe he isn't the best at delivering lines played it perfect, because it's sort of like the whole Jaws thing. Like, we couldn't show the shark and it worked better. Ivan Drago doesn't say very much, and it makes him more intimidating.
Absolutely. Yeah. Stallone did such a good job, and we've talked about it before when we talked about it in our first podcast. Like, Stallone wrote these villain parts so well, even coming up with, like we've talked about, Apollo Creed, Clubber Lang, and Ivan Drago. Just three amazing bad guy names. And Ivan Drago maybe just probably the peak of it. And, like finding the perfect person, like you said, the look where he's just so big. And it tapped into the things that, it was like USA versus Russia. And so it just naturally positioned him to be hated. And then on top of it, he's on steroids. And it's like all these just bad qualities. And he, spoiler alert, he kills our beloved Apollo Creed and just has the all-time villain line of if he dies, he dies. And like you said, just his voice, his lack of, I don't know, just amazing acting, or, he's just so cold, and which, is what the character required. So I wouldn't say Dolph Lundgren's bad in that movie at all. But yeah, just if he dies, he dies. You're like, oh my gosh. So he just killed Apollo Creed, and he just said, if he dies, he dies. Oh, like right there, all-time villain,
Yeah. Really nowhere for his career to go but down after that
and
one.
Unfortunately, that's where it went. Yeah. And also, they do the really smart thing in Rocky IV, like you were talking about, where a lot of times the hero and the villain are the opposites. So Rocky IV, for all of its ridiculousness, does have some smart touches to it, because it shows Stallone training. And then Ivan Drago's doing, Stallone's doing it the hard way. He's chopping wood and he's scaling mountains, and Drago's got the state-of-the-art equipment and facilities, and he's, in the confines of this facility, and Stallone's out in the elements. And so it's like the complete opposites, and that stuff works really well too.
Yeah, it does.
It does. It just works. Like, even though Rocky IV is absurd and it's basically a music video, like that stuff works. And you're showing the contrast between the hero and the villain, and just really, really well done. And, like, you're 100% rooting for Rocky. Like, unlike Carl Weathers was, Apollo Creed, I think, was meant to I think they intentionally, and Carl Weathers was able to portray some likability
Mm-hmm.
in Apollo Creed, whereas Drago, he is written as a villain. So
Yeah.
yeah, just an all-time great. And I think you could have the same conversation about Clubber Lang in
Yes.
Rocky 3.
Yes, you could. I kind of went back and forth
I know.
on which one should I even bring
I
up.
think Drago is just kind of more villainous,
Yeah.
maybe. I don't know.
And frankly more iconic.
Probably.
That was
I do love Clubber Lang,
Yeah.
but
That was another thing that I was thinking about is there's several great villains in movies that I was going through, but as I thought about it, I was like, their names are just not like these other people I'm listing.
Yeah.
Like you say that name and everybody knows that character.
oh yeah.
Like there's just too many iconic villains for me to pick some of the other ones that I was looking through. Unless they were like those are really good villains, but like there's too many iconic ones to mention some of the ones. So let's talk another iconic one that you already brought up, the Joker. And in all fairness to everybody who's played the Joker and done a great job, including Jack Nicholson, we're talking about Heath Ledger's Joker.
oh yeah,
It's the definitive Joker.
it is. Even though they keep on doing more Joker, and you're like,
Yes.
people, come on.
Yeah. And he's sort of a third alternative to what we talked about. We talked about, the big muscle bound, like the physical look of it. We talked about the really smart, savvy, like, with his mind, Hans Gruber.
Mm-hmm.
And the Joker is this third thing where it's psychotic. It's
Yeah,
chaos. It's the craziness. It's a crazy villain. That's what it is. It's this person is capable of anything because they're crazy
Yeah.
type of villain.
I mean, and that's like, we talked about it when we did like our Dark Knight trilogy, where it's like, that's the whole thing of the character. And he even says the word, he's like, I just do things.
Mhm.
Like he says that, and that stays true to the character. Like he does these plans and stuff, but they were so smart in how they wrote that, where it's like, but he really doesn't care whether they work out or not, because he's just doing stuff. And it's, I mean, I don't know if, we're going to do power rankings or not, but I mean, I'd say for a lot of people, that's the all-time number one villain in a movie.
It is, it's hard to argue. And talk about a villain stealing a movie.
Oh my gosh.
And-
I mean, just the poster.
Yeah.
That first poster that we talked about with him, and he's writing Why So Serious, where it's like right then, you could just, you just knew, like, he's stealing this show.
Yeah.
And he did.
Yeah. And again, talking about villains being able to get the attention, he got an Oscar.
He literally
for that
won an Oscar,
performance.
yeah.
Which was, I don't know. There's not a lot of people who played villains and won Oscars for it. There's a couple, but
There's
not
some,
a lot.
yeah,
But that one is just, it's unbelievable.
every decision they made about that character, every scene they wrote with that character in it, and every, all of Heath Ledger's contribution to the character, like literally everything works. From his look to his voice to the performance to the scene, like we talked about, Ledger gets so much credit, which he deserves, but Nolan wrote this character and wrote this amazing dialogue that he delivers, and everything, what are movie characters if not just a series of decisions, right? And every decision is spot on for the Joker character in that movie.
Yeah. And we talk about, again, something we talk about often on this podcast, how important of an ingredient mystery is to so many characters.
Yes.
And the fact that his character is just, I mean, it's all mystery. It's just shrouded
Yeah.
in mystery. You never find out
You don't know his
a
name.
an origin. That, in fact, like, one of the things you most know about him is he makes up his origin over and over again.
Yeah.
And
Which we
so
talked
you
about
don't
before,
know.
like, that's just a genius touch.
That is, and which is why it's so funny that not many years after that, somebody actually thought, you know what we need is a Joker origin movie. Which
That drives me crazy. Like, I'll just go ahead and tell you this. You know who's not on my list? Darth Vader. I think Darth Vader is cool, but it got so watered down with the prequels where we literally see him from little kid to teenager to young adult, and we see step by step by step how he became Darth Vader, to the point where they show them slowly lowering the Darth Vader mask onto it. And that just, I don't want to say killed the character, but all the mystique is gone.
Mm-hmm.
It's all gone. And with the Joker, and unfortunately, a lot of that, is because Heath Ledger died. So it's like it's just this one and done thing. And there's like in Dark Knight Rises, they don't talk about the Joker. The movie after Dark Knight, they don't talk about the Joker. They don't tell well, he's still locked up in the it's just left alone. So it just is this amazing thing that there's so many unanswered questions to. And you're exactly right. That just adds to the mystique.
Yeah. I think everybody agrees though. Like, we would have loved to have seen another movie with the Joker, not to answer more questions, but just man,
I just want to see him and Batman just continue
a performance. Talk about leaving the people wanting more.
Oh my gosh! Because even at the end of Dark Knight, he's like Joker's talking to Batman. He's like, "I believe you and I are destined to do this forever." You're like, "Yeah, I would have just watched another Dark Knight movie where they play that back and forth chess match like we talked about."
Oh, absolutely.
And I would also say, I didn't think this through, but definitely I would say probably top 5 for like villain introductions in a movie. Mm-hmm. Like that opening scene, that bank robbery and how he tricks everyone. And I can tell you, when I saw The Dark Knight, I remember this like it was yesterday. I saw The Dark Knight on opening night in the theater. And when he says, "What doesn't kill you makes you stranger," and he pulls his mask off, I mean, there was like an audible like, oh, like even though we all knew it was the Joker and we had seen trailers and posters and we like something about seeing that, in real time up on the big screen, like it got an audible reaction from that audience that night. Mm-hmm. Because we all knew like this performance is something special. We just knew it. And that opening scene was so good. And it was just like when he finally unmasked for the first time, you're like, it was almost like, I almost think people wanted to like break out in applause. Like It was just, I don't know that there'll ever be anything like that again. Just that hype about that character and stuff. I just don't know that we'll ever see something like that again.
Yeah. If there's any negative to Ledger's Joker, it's that he's shown so brightly that honestly, as good as the rest of the movie probably is, when he's not on screen, you're just kind of like, I want to get back to the Joker.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's a funny balance because you're like, I do think one of the things that makes it so good is, like you said, it's the ultimate like leave you wanting more. Mm-hmm. And I don't know what the number is of like how much screen time he has in that movie. But yeah,
it was the right decision.
Because, it was, but you're right. You're like, man, if I wish there was like 3 deleted scenes or something that I could watch on YouTube, just more Joker.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But no more other people doing bad Joker takes that are like Heath Ledger adjacent. You could tell everybody who takes the part is really, it's like the core is, okay, I got to do what Ledger did, but I got to make it a little different.
I can't do exactly what he did,
because I don't want to look like a rip-off.
Yes. I definitely got that vibe from Saltburn guy who's going to take over the Joker role. And
Barry
Keoghan.
Yeah, I don't know how to pronounce it. I've heard it pronounced like 5 different ways, but it looks like Keoghan.
And they just show him very little in the Batman, but you can tell it's like he took he's following the trail that Heath Ledger blazed, and it's like either just leave that character out or just come up with something. Of course, I say that, and then like we got like Jared Leto's Joker in Suicide Squad, which was just bad in my opinion. Like, there was nothing good or interesting about that performance.
Yeah, I may regret saying this if someone does it and then I see it, but I honestly almost think people would be better off just saying, you know what, I'm just trying to pick up the mantle from Ledger and do his Joker. He's not around. I'm going to do my best to do that same version because A, it's the best version, and B, like we kind of know that's what you're doing anyways.
So just admit it.
Yeah. Stop trying to like twist it a little, like because the twist is always the worst part of it. Like, this little thing they're doing. Maybe just embrace the fact that that's what you're doing.
Yeah. Just say it out loud.
Yeah. I'll let you throw out a villain because I feel like I've been doing all the picking.
Well, I think you got to mention Hannibal Lecter.
He was literally next on my list.
There you go, Anthony Hopkins. Another example too, though, where like I just look at it as the original Silence of the Lambs. Unfortunately, that it's like the Temptation. It was a well-received character. He won an Oscar for it. It quickly became almost like a pulp culture people would quote him and imitate him and stuff. And then they did, like Hannibal and Red Dragon. And I don't like those at all. But that original Silence of the Lambs, I did not see that in the theater. I was only 11 when it came out. But I just remember, like, all the buzz around that performance, and just people talking about like how scary he was, and kind of that famous opening or first time you meet him, where the Jodie Foster character is walking down the hall, and then when she gets to his cell, he's just standing there, and you're like, "Whoa, that was really scary!" And it's just a old guy standing there, and kind of the ultimate example of like something that works so well in movies when it's done right. Is they talk up the character for 5 or 10 minutes before you meet him, and everyone, it's like, be afraid of this guy. Like the Scott Glenn character, like the FBI agent, he's like, don't let Hannibal Lecter inside your mind, and he's saying all these ominous things, so you're preconditioned to almost be afraid of that character before you even meet him. And then when you meet him, the performance matches, where Anthony Hopkins is just so good in that role, and it's such a literally a part you can sink your teeth into. But gosh, I regret saying that. No, but like just such a well-written part, such a well-acted part, and just finding the perfect actor for the part, and everything just comes together. And then I wish that was more of a Joker situation. Not that Anthony Hopkins would have passed away, but that would just be the one thing we got. And it's not, but that's the one that people remember the most.
Yeah. And I'm pretty sure, hasn't there even been like a TV series or something?
There was.
Like a Hannibal
TV series, yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of Hannibal IP that shouldn't have been there.
Yeah, but you're right. It's the Silence of the Lambs. And in fact, like, talk about being iconic and stealing the show, where you're not even actually the main villain of the movie, but everyone forgets that.
Yeah. Buffalo Bill's the villain of the movie.
Right.
Yeah.
But Hannibal Lecter, still, I think it is something small, like 15 minutes of screen time.
I think it's 16
like
minutes.
And yet he has the biggest impact. And
he won a Best Actor Oscar when actually he probably should have won a Best Supporting Actor Oscar.
Right. Which is, just wild.
It is wild, yeah.
But, I mean, I'm not upset about it.
No, I mean, it's it's the ultimate example of like, if you quiz people and you're like, how long or how many minutes of screen time does he have? Probably everybody would get it wrong, because they would guess that, if you said 45 minutes, 35 minutes, 20 minutes, or 16 minutes, everyone would probably guess 45 minutes, because he feels like he's such a part of that
his
movie.
His presence lingers over it. Yeah.
Yep.
All right. Next one that I wrote down. Another Hans Lando from
Inglourious Basterds on my list.
Just again, talk about villain introductions, and it's such a great opening scene to a movie. It's such a slow burn.
One of the all-time greats, in my opinion.
This is the thing that blows my mind about it, is if you're just like pitching that opening scene, it doesn't sound like anything or something exciting. But the way it's filmed and the way it's acted, probably even scored, it just builds tension so
one of the most suspenseful scenes ever.
Yeah.
And nothing happens.
And then until it does.
Happens, yeah.
And then when it does, you're just like, oh my gosh, this villain, like, he just worked this guy over and then just cold-hearted executed these people. And from that point on, you're like, yeah, this is a villain.
Sneeze. I think it's going away. We're having whatever else could go wrong today. My phone went crazy. I'm sneezing. Oh my gosh. Sorry. Go ahead. I felt it coming and then it went away.
You're totally okay. But he's definitely he's sort of the Hans Gruber ilk, in that he's just really smart and even kind of funny at times.
He is.
But menacing as can be.
Yeah. Like I shouldn't be scared of Christoph Waltz. Like, he's not big or scary or intimidating, but does it so well. And one thing I think is so good about that performance and that character, whereas like we were talking earlier, like about Carl Weathers, where you're like, oh, Apollo Creed, he's kind of the villain, but I love him so much. It's like, this guy is just despicable.
Mm-hmm.
No redeeming quality. Like, I guess maybe the redeeming qualities are just how good the performance is, that it kind of wins you over. But the character himself, it's like Tarantino wasn't trying to write like the cool, hip villain. Like, he's just evil and he's scum, and he jumps on the girl and just strangles her, and you're like, golly. And he just the ultimate, like, I can't wait to see this guy get what's coming to him.
Yes.
Like,
absolutely, which is why the last scene is so effective.
satisfying. Yeah.
But even that's one of those ones too, with like great little behind the scene, or not behind the scenes, but like things you may not have noticed at 1st that make his character like so smart. That opening scene, like he's shaking hands with all the daughters, and I saw a thing where it pointed out like his fingers are going over their wrist, he's checking their pulse.
Yeah,
and immediately knows something's up. And then like the scene where he's interviewing the main girl, Shoshana, about using her theater, and he orders the dessert for her, and she starts eating. He says, "Wait for the creme," and it's because she can't, as a Jew, have the cream, and he's testing her. And like, at first I didn't catch that because it didn't register with me. Like, oh, Jews can't have that. But like, then I heard that, I was like, oh, that's brilliant. You know, like these little details that he does to just test people.
Oh yeah,
makes him great.
One of the all-time, and like, he's so good. Like, and I'm sure this was a decision, where it's like, even just when he eats or like he sips his coffee, and you're like, that's so obnoxious. He's just so snooty and so like everything he does, you're like, oh my gosh, I just want someone to get this guy. Like they build and they build and they build, and then like you said, ultimately he does get it bad. But it's like all those decisions are so smart and so well done, and he was rewarded. He won an Oscar for that role. So
yeah, and then of course, his ability to speak multiple languages, which was necessary for the character. And like, I know Tarantino said when he found Christoph Waltz, he knew he had his movie, because he didn't know how anybody was going to pull it off, kind of faking knowing all these languages.
Wasn't it like? Didn't he consider DiCaprio at some point for that role?
I think when he was writing it, he kind of had like maybe
DiCaprio
Leo in his mind.
Yeah.
And that's, it's one of those things of like, DiCaprio's great, but yes, it went to the right guy.
It absolutely did.
Yeah. And then, fortunately, he got some great DiCaprio performances down the road.
Yeah, and it all worked out.
And we could even talk about DiCaprio on this list of great villains, because he's a great villain.
I almost put him on there for Django Unchained.
Django Unchained.
Yeah.
But I didn't write him down, and it's just like, again, there's a lot of great villains, and I just didn't think about it in the moment.
Yeah, I considered it, and I didn't. Me not putting him on here doesn't mean I don't think he was fantastic in that movie. I've said it many times on here. I'm a big Leo guy, so.
Yeah. Speaking of Leo, indirectly, the next name I wrote down on my list, this is actually a movie I don't love, but it's one of the greatest performances I've ever seen, Bill the Butcher in Gangs of New York.
Yeah.
Of course, played by the legendary Daniel Day-Lewis. I say I don't love that movie, but I will watch that movie just for that performance.
Oh my gosh.
It is so good. Like, everything he does on the screen is so captivating, and it's actually like, listen, I think Leonardo DiCaprio has turned into one of our finest actors.
Oh, he blows DiCaprio up.
But this is young DiCaprio who's not ready to keep up with.
No.
I mean, to be fair, nobody's keeping up with Daniel Day-Lewis in this movie.
DiCaprio's a bore in that movie compared to Daniel Day-Lewis.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know who. He did not win the Oscar for that movie. I don't know who beat him. That may have been the year Denzel won for Training Day.
Which is another villain.
Yeah. I could be wrong about that, but I may be right. But yeah, Daniel Day-Lewis is, talk about like, you say it on here before, like chewing the scenery. Oh my gosh. But it's like, when you say that, it's not always an insult. Like in this case, it's the ultimate compliment. He is chewing the scenery, but because it's Daniel Day-Lewis, it's so well done. It's so captivating. It's almost funny in a way, like in a weird way, that performance is, even though he's playing, a despicable person, but like just the joy that Daniel Day-Lewis has in playing a villain just comes off the screen, and he looks, he created this look, he created this walk, he created this voice. Everything about it is unreal.
Yeah, honestly, the voice is like, it's amazing to me. Like, I've gone back in recent years and like looked up interviews with Daniel Day-Lewis because it occurs to me, I'm like, I have no idea what this guy actually sounds like.
He's so soft spoken.
Yes, and you hear that and you go, holy crap! Did he change and create something?
Yes,
with
because his real voice is like, like I said, he's almost like a soft. It's like a whisper almost, and you can tell he's ultra intelligent and very thoughtful and considered. And then you look at like Bill the Butcher in Gangs of New York, and it's unbelievable.
By the way, he lost to Adrian Brody for The Pianist that year.
Oh my gosh!
Which I've not seen that movie, and Adrian Brody's probably great, but it's really hard to imagine that he was better than Daniel Day-Lewis was.
Yeah,
because Daniel Day-Lewis's performance in that movie was, in my opinion, one of the greatest performances I've ever seen. Like I said, I don't love the movie, but I will watch. I own the movie. I will return to the movie and watch it every once in a while, just because I'm like, he's so good.
Yeah, I've always said that movie. It's like a B+ Scorsese movie.
Yeah,
like a lot of Scorsese movies are A+. This is like a B or a B+.
Yeah,
but Daniel Day-Lewis is unbelievable, almost to the point where it's not his fault, but it's like you said with DiCaprio, and then like he's just acting circles around everyone. Cameron Diaz can't even kind of keep up with him in that movie. Like she's just not very good in that movie, and he's that is like the one-man show for that movie. Like he's so good in that movie, and in a way, it almost feels like maybe that doesn't get talked about enough. How good he is in that movie. Maybe I'm wrong, but it almost feels a little underrated.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't look at a lot, but I did Google, some of the best villain performances and look at a couple lists.
He wasn't
on any of them, and that,
and compared to some of the things that were on the list that I saw, like,
I just think it's a movie that just kind of got forgotten, and I kind of get what the movie got forgotten over time, but not his performance. No. That should have been remembered, and his character, frankly.
No, absolutely. Adrian Brody, Pianist. Give me a break.
And I think that's the thing that what we haven't said is that a great villain elevates a hero, because the fact that a hero has to rise to that level of a villain can like really elevate your movie. And I think the problem with Gangs of New York is what we're talking about. The hero couldn't rise to the villain, and it just, you end up like going, in the end when DiCaprio kind of wins more or less, you're like, how?
You're right. You're right. You're absolutely right. The hero does not even come close to matching the villain in that movie.
Yeah.
And I hate to say that because I love DiCaprio, and like you said, he's given 1,000 great performances since then. That is not one of his great performances. He's not actively bad in the movie.
No.
It's just it's an uninteresting character, and just further amplified by how badly he's blown off the screen.
And for sure, DiCaprio's character was the angsty, hard-headed teenager, basically coming back to like
avenge his son. Father. Yeah.
Whereas Day-Lewis, it's like, okay, you're gonna play Bill the Butcher. He's this eccentric, outspoken, kind of charismatic but violent. Like he's just a lot more going on with.
You're not keeping up with that.
Yeah. All right. You got any? Let's just ask. Do you have any more on your particularly just human?
I could do a couple. I can go through them quickly. Anton Chigurh.
I got him on my list.
Javier Bardem from No Country for Old Men.
Yeah.
Just an all-time performance. Mm-hmm. The weirdest probably look in movie history. It's another example, like even though it's not similar to the Joker's performance, where it's kind of just like, let's just put or like Hannibal Lecter maybe more so, like let's just put evil on screen. Mm-hmm. And this is a movie that takes place in I think 1980. So it's like evil portrayed, but with the weird 80s look. He's got the really weird hairdo and his outfits and everything, but just an all-time villain, an all-time scary character.
And really like the opposite of what we were just saying about Bill the Butcher, where it was Daniel Day-Lewis really be big and showy. They were like, Bardem be as plain as possible.
Quiet, don't mix your words. Just
hardly make facial expressions because we want you to be emotionless.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
and he's got and it's a great performance, and he just has the benefit of the Coen brothers writing. Mm-hmm. It's from a book. Just that material was excellent, and he just brought it to life so well. And he has cool weapons in that movie. Like that makes him unique and just an all around win. And another example of an actor winning an Oscar for a villain.
Yeah.
So I had him. I did throw out, and I don't, it's not an all timer, but the Warden from the Shawshank Redemption.
I thought about him. I thought about him and the lead guard, because I was like, they're both, they kind of work as a pair.
They kind of do.
The brains and the muscle.
But just a great example of like a villain that's not in a action or horror movie, a villain in a drama, and just a really despicable character, and just a great example of a villain helping to elevate a movie because it's so satisfying when you see him get what's coming to him, and when you see the Tim Robbins character, the whole movie is the Warden getting the best of Andy Dufresne, the Tim Robbins character, and then you have to be patient with that movie because in the end it's the ultimate, like, Tim Robbins turns it all back around against the Warden, and you get to see it all unfold, and it just works perfectly, and just one of the all-time, like, that guy got exactly what he deserved.
Yeah, and another performance where the actor is just forever going to be linked to that character, because I think for most people are like me, you see him in other things and you're like, hey, it's the Warden from Shawshank.
Honestly, I don't know that actor's name. I think it's Bob Gunton or something like that, but it's not I had to think for a second.
Yeah. Definitely go to the Warden from Shawshank as the first thought.
Yep. And then I threw out, I can go quick. I did throw out Kathy Bates in Misery.
It's a good one.
A really great female villain performance, and just a really good portrayal of, like, this woman is crazy.
Yeah, and talking about another one that's a great slow burn.
Because
it starts off the movie and you think, oh, what a sweet lady, and then it just
increases,
like, wait a
second, this lady's, and then it's like, whoa, leading to the sledgehammer scene.
Oh my gosh, one of the most
hard to watch scenes in movie history.
Like, kind of iconic. Like, people see that, they don't forget that.
No, they don't. She won an Oscar for that movie also. And then I did, I've got two more. One of them I'll say is John Doe in Seven.
It's a good one.
Played by Kevin Spacey. Very small screen time, but definitely leaves an impression. He's really great. He's got that scene where they're all riding out together, and Kevin Spacey's really, really good. And then one I did throw out that is from a comedy. I wrote down Biff from Back to the Future. And not an all-time great or anything, but just like, what a great job he did of just being the obnoxious bully who you just, like, when George McFly punches him out towards the end of that movie, like, you just want to stand up and clap. It's just a good performance in a comedy.
Yeah, no, you're right. That's a great choice. I wrote down one comedic performance villain, and that was Shooter McGavin. From Happy Gilmore.
I never even thought about that one.
I think he's one of the great, like...
Oh, he's such a jerk.
It's perfect. Like, a golf snob.
Oh, yeah. It's perfect. You're right. I didn't think about that one.
I think those two are great picks to represent comedy villains.
Represent comedy a little bit, yeah. And that's my human list.
All right. Perfect. Let's talk about our non-human
list.
I'll let you kick this one off. What are some of your top ones? I bet I could guess a couple, but I want to hear you say them.
Sure. I'll save probably the one a lot of people will know I'm going to save for last. I did write the shark from Jaws.
Yep. Bruce.
And I won't dwell on that because we've done an entire podcast, but just, I mean, it's like not necessarily even a villain, I guess, because it's just a shark being a shark,
Right.
But I mean, he's the bad guy of that movie.
Right. I wrote that down. I kind of had an extra little category as like animals, Jaws, either the T-Rex or the Velociraptors from Jurassic
those
Park.
are good ones too. Yeah,
the lions from Ghost in the Darkness. Like there's some
good animal villains.
Yeah.
I did have the Predator.
Yeah,
is one of my all-time villains. Just the ultimate, like, looks cool weapons. And then it's like on top of that, they thought of the really cool, like when they show things through the Predator's point of view, like that was really original. Like nothing had ever been done like that before. And like, I think in some ways Predator is underrated. Like people are like, Predator rules. It's an awesome action movie. I think it's just an awesome movie.
Yeah.
Like I don't think it has to be confined to the action movie category. That's just a really good movie. And the Predator is an awesome villain. And it's a really cool idea where it's like this creature from outer space just coming, and it's basically like he's a hunter.
Yeah, he's a big game hunter.
Yeah, like, that's just a really cool idea, and like it's actually kind of a smart movie in some parts where like in the end it's just Schwarzenegger and the girl left, and she goes to pick up the gun and he kicks it out of her hand. He's like, no, because the predator won't attack her if she's unarmed.
And I was gonna say that's the kind of surprising thing about Predator is Predator's got like sort of a code of ethics.
He does.
He hunts down people who are
Armed
going to defend themselves, but leaves the innocents, if you will,
and
alone.
that's kind of a cool, and we'll get to that a little bit more with some of my other choices. That's kind of a cool trait in a villain, like the villain that has a like, okay, I'll do all these terrible things, but here's the one thing I won't do. Like, that's kind of cool.
Yeah.
And just like I said, just the look is iconic and awesome.
Yes, they nailed the look.
They nailed the look.
Which, again, I'm not an expert on all representations of aliens before that point, but it just always seemed like they sort of like long stick figure body with the big bulbous head.
Like
and
the cliche of what we think about. Yep.
And that was just something so different and unique. Like, kind of has a body like a human, but everything's different in like the face with the mandibles and the
awesome. And before he has before he takes his mask off, his mask is cool. He's got that gun on his shoulders. Like I said earlier, a character is just a series of decisions brought to life. Just a bunch of cool decisions. He's got like dreadlocks.
Yeah.
Like, that's just cool.
Yeah, they nailed it.
They did, and they were really smart. They cast a really tall guy.
Yeah.
So when he's standing next to Schwarzenegger, you're like, that dude towers over Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Yeah.
Just a really smart decision.
Yeah. Again, maybe a little bit of luck that the original thing didn't work out because it was originally, as we know, Jean-Claude Van Damme.
Yep. And you can YouTube it and see what that character looked like, and it's ridiculous. Do you want me to keep going, or do you want to jump
going?
In? I had the Queen Alien from Aliens, and you could really throw in any of the, what they call them, the xenomorphs from Alien.
Again, just great character design.
Great character design. Just a really cool creation. And then it was like, also, they're going to have acid for blood. It's just those little decisions that are made, whether it's in the writing process or, like the pre-production process, that you're like, well, that's just cool. And then like in the original Alien, they have the scene where the blood drips, and it just, like, they keep going from level to level of the spaceship, and that acid blood is dripping through each level, and just a really cool idea.
Yeah.
And just awesome design. It's iconic. Like, I guarantee you people know what that, like, they might not know this is from the movie Alien or Aliens, but you show them a picture and they're like, yeah, I've seen that. I know what that is.
Mm-hmm.
Like, just really cool. I did write down, and we don't need to dwell on this because we did a whole horror movie episode, but your Freddy Kruegers, your Jasons, Chucky from Child's Play, like these horror movie villains. Michael Myers that have stood the test of time. And for better or usually worse, they just keep going and going and going and going. But, iconic, just completely iconic. I would rank probably Freddy as just one of the coolest because of the creation of the glove. Just a real, like, he's got the glove, which is just a glove with knives for the fingers. So,
well, and being the one that stands out from Jason and Michael Myers stuff, and that he's the villain, the horror movie villain with a personality who talks.
Yeah. So I won't dwell on that. Now I'm getting into my couple of main inventors, the T-1000 from Terminator 2.
Yes.
Arguably, I could probably convince myself my favorite villain in movie history. And I was trying to think, even before we started recording, like, why that is. Because it's a performance where the character says very little. And he's not a robot, I guess. He's a creation from the future. So he's liquid metal, which, so number one, that's a genius idea.
Mm-hmm.
And it leads to just so many cool visuals. But the whole point of that character is just, like just this cold calculating machine that has a mission. So it's not the flashiness or the chewing the scenery like we talk about. It's that cold efficiency that works so well for the character. But for whatever reason, it's just one of the most memorable villains of all time.
Yeah. It's the unstoppable quality. It's
there you go.
How do we get away from a guy who can look like anybody and sound like anybody? How do we, he can change his hand in any kind of blade or weapon, and then like
Guns do nothing.
How do you kill him? Yeah, like when you shoot him, he splatters a little bit and then comes back together.
Yep.
There's a sense of just like there's nothing you can do with this guy.
Yeah, and that is just so cool and so memorable. And then he just had the benefit of being in that movie when Cameron just peaked with his creativity and his spectacle and his stunts, and so it's this cool villain, and all these cool things are happening in the movie. Like it's iconic when he gets frozen and the Terminator shoots him and he shatters, and like all that stuff is just so cool.
Yeah,
that you're so the Robert Patrick is the actor. He is just so linked with all that stuff that it just is one of the all-time great villain performances.
Yeah, not just as you're saying, the being frozen, being shot, shattered into all the pieces. But that's really, that's the scene you get where he feels so unstoppable because all the little parts start coming back together, and you're just like, that didn't work. Yeah. So,
and then just that, like having someone who, because the big thing with Terminator 2, like we've talked about, is Schwarzenegger's the good guy. So like, well, who's going to go up against Schwarzenegger? And so you have this genius invention of, like you said, the unstoppable villain, and all that just works perfectly to, make one of the all-time great villains.
Yeah.
And then I had one more. Do you want me to do that?
Yep.
So Thanos.
That's what I was getting. I knew those two would be probably the top of your list.
I really think, and I've tried my best to contain my Marvel nerd tendencies on this podcast. I think, especially now when everyone's kind of turned against Marvel, and it's more cool to, dump all over it than it is to praise it. I think Thanos is just a genius creation. It's not it's from the comics and stuff, but the way they did Thanos in the MCU, so it's got a lot of advantages. Like number one, they took their time. You see Thanos very briefly in the end credit scene of Avengers 1. And he doesn't become the villain and like the focal point until Avengers 3, Avengers Infinity War. And I think you hit it a while ago when we were talking about somebody, the Predator, where it's like, I have a code, I won't do this thing. And I think Thanos is a really, really smart, such a smart written character, where he has this mission and he has this whole thing going for him where it's like, he has a reason for he wants to wipe out half of every living creature. But in his mind, he's doing it for the greater good. And so it's like, this is really interesting dynamic where he's, everyone's against him and he looks like the bad guy. And he is the bad guy. But he's got this whole thing where he's like, look, I'm trying to help everybody. Like, it's kind of a really cool dynamic in this, superhero spectacle CGI fest. I really, really think if people will just watch that and give it a shot and really look at that character and listen to his dialogue, I think he has really good dialogue. He has some really good speeches. And like when he explains why he's doing what he's doing, I just think it's really, really well done.
Yeah. Talk about, again, little you may have missed this things that you see after movies that make you appreciate a scene more.
Mm-hmm.
There's that great moment near the end of Infinity War where Thanos is fighting off all the Avengers, where he shows up to get the last Infinity Stone, and as he kind of swings at Captain America catches his glove and then kind of pushes it back a little bit and shocks him. But then what I read was that apparently the Infinity Stones, everyone's going like, how can Captain America fight back against him when he's got the powerful glove on? And the thing said that whoever's in contact with the glove, with the Infinity Stones, it's really controlled by the will, the willpower. And so as Captain America took hold of it, it became a battle of willpower, Captain America's will versus Thanos'. And it was making a point that Thanos is this ultimate, he is the ultimate willpower. He's driven by this will to. And Captain America is the first person whose will has ever almost matched his
that's
own.
Really cool.
And pushed it. And I was like, I'm glad they didn't come out and say it. There wasn't pause in the movie Captain, look at Captain, his will match. It's so enhanced by knowing that afterwards. What a cool moment little of
subtlety almost in an Avengers movie.
Yes, and again, like you're reading like behind the scenes, like fan kind of theory or like explanation from the comics or something. So like, I don't know if it's true, but it checks out. And I go like, I already thought it was kind of a cool like visual moment.
It is,
but now it's a great
it just adds another layer
and
to it,
and a great just moment in the movie. Yeah.
Well, and I think that's what's so cool about the Thanos character. Like you said, like he just like, here's my mission I want to complete. I'm going to collect these stones and I'm going to wipe out half of the universe, galaxy, whatever you want to say. And it's like you go back and watch Infinity War, and there's a lot of fights and destruction and stuff. Thanos never kills any, like, he's not just like I want to kill the Avengers, you know, where it's like an Age of Ultron or something that's not near as memorable. Like, that's the whole thing, is like, the Avengers are bad, I'm going to kill them. The Avengers are just in his way. And he's like, get out of my way because I'm trying to accomplish this goal. And I just think it's got a lot of layers to it in a movie that you wouldn't really think has a lot of layers to it. And then, you know, it's like the Infinity War Endgame, you know, 1 year apart thing. And then in Endgame, you know, spoiler alert, they kill Thanos at the beginning, and then Thanos from however many years ago, like
from the past.
Right. And he's got, like, he's like, you know what, I wanted to just wipe out half the galaxy for the good. Now you guys have ticked me off. And now I just want, like, he just, like, his dialogue and everything they wrote for that character has impact to it. And it's it's obviously like I don't even know what you call it, like the Andy Serkis type of performance, like the
motion
capture. But Josh Brolin, who plays Thanos, does a really good job.
Yeah.
Do you agree with any of them? Like, you're not as much of an Avengers guy, so does this just sound ridiculous to you that I think Thanos is?
No, I mean, I put him on my list.
Yeah,
I think he's a great villain. You know, other holes I could pick. Am I one of those people going like, couldn't you also accomplish your plan by using those stones to double all the resources rather than half the people?
Absolutely,
I get that.
So,
right. Like, yes, like, am I the type of person that lets that bother me more than I should? Maybe, but I still think he's a great villain who works as the culminating opposing force from all that build up.
Yes,
you couldn't have, and for all of Marvel's successes, the one thing they were kind of consistently criticized for was weak villains, and so they really needed to hit a home run with this culminating villain.
But you know what? Part of me wonders, and I don't know this, but if Marvel wasn't playing the long game, because they, you know, you read backwards now, and they kind of knew when they started Iron Man 1, their vision was to build up this universe like they did and culminate with Thanos. And that's part of what makes Thanos so effective, because before that, in all these solo, you know, like Mickey Rourke is the villain in Iron Man 2, he's terrible. But it's like the Avengers or Iron Man or, you know, whether it's as a unit or individuals, they so easily dispose of the bad guy. So it was really effective when Infinity War came out, and all of a sudden you're like, Thanos is whooping the Avengers. Like, I remember when we saw Infinity War in the IMAX, you know, packed theater, and in the first 10 minutes of that movie, Thanos beats the crap out of the Hulk. And that got like an audible reaction from that theater. It was like, ooh, like oohs and ahs, and like people were shocked because, you know, maybe it was accidental, maybe it was intentional, but Marvel, you know, because they played the long game and they had this long universe planned out, you had never seen anybody beat up the Hulk before. So that right there made Thanos look cool and different. And then you throw in like, this is actually like a well-written character with like real motivations, instead of just like your villain of the week who just like, I want to kill all the Avengers.
Yeah. But he also, I mean, and you talk about him beating up the Hulk, he's built like the Hulk. He's huge.
He's huge.
And he just, you know, it's a perfect moment when he shows up on wherever it is, and Doctor Strange goes, oh yeah, you're much more of a Thanos.
Yeah.
Right? And you're like, you just see this guy and you go, yeah, you're the big bad.
You're the big bad. And that's another example, though. If you watch that scene between Thanos and Doctor Strange, that there's really good dialogue. And people don't think of that. Like, Doctor Strange is like, oh, so you think you're the savior. And he's like, I'm a survivor. And Thanos has this speech that's like, that's actually like pretty thoughtful, like good, well-written. Like, look, I'm not saying he should have won an Oscar. Right. But I'm just saying, like, for the expectations of a superhero movie, I think they did put some time and some care and some thought into that villain and that performance.
I'm with you. I honestly, I'm one of those people. Not to give away something that's coming up in our podcast, where we're going to draft Marvel movies, but I am one of those people who prefers Infinity War to Endgame, and I think in large part because Thanos. I enjoyed Thanos so much, and Infinity War was
Infinity War is a
Thanos
movie.
Yeah, and so I'm on board with that.
Yeah,
with
he
Thanos.
just and like I mean, I'm a Marvel guy, so I'm kind of probably predisposed to choosing Thanos. And again, I'm not saying like that is my definitive number one.
Mm-hmm.
You could probably, you could definitely persuade me to have T-1000 on there, but just a really, really high contender. And I do think, even though those movies made $1 trillion, I think it's underrated. I do. That's just my opinion. The like I said, the thought they put into that character instead of just like, okay, you're Thanos, just go beat up the Avengers. Like, I just think I think they just took a little bit of extra time and put a little bit of extra thought into that character, and I think it really pays off.
Yeah. Honestly, not my only, but like my big criticism of Marvel and their build up to Thanos is they teased him a lot. I wish they would have shown just a little more snippets.
Sure.
Like I still think like the flashback they do with Gamora on her planet when she's a kid. Throw that in a Guardians movie so we see Thanos doing something
that would have been cool,
more before like it was really like kept teasing and then it's boom, he's just all the way here, and I wish they would have done some more.
That's all fair.
But that's all like in support of Thanos being a good character is give us a little little more.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm with you. I'll kind of wrap up with my list with just a couple of mine. I mean, you got the big ones, but my sort of honorable mentions in sci-fi. Thanks to a movie that we talked about so much recently, Godzilla's on my list.
I figured he would be.
Pennywise from It 1.
I was going to say, I almost put Pennywise, but then all I could picture was It 2.
Yeah.
I was just like, eh.
Going right along with that, Agent Smith from the original, The Matrix.
Yeah.
1999, The Mummy. The actual Mummy character. I was like,
that's a good one.
That was a good villain.
And that was, when that movie came along, like, it did feel like they made a little bit of a leap in how good CGI could look. Because it was like, I remember seeing the trailer where it showed like the mummy's coming towards someone and they're shooting him, and he's kind of like zombie mummy, and I was like, whoa, that looks really cool. Yeah. And that shot alone suckered me in to go and see that movie.
Yeah, for sure. Magneto from the X-Men movies.
He's really good in those.
Which he kind of chose that line between, he hops back and forth between good guy, bad guy, depending on the movie and scenario, which is kind of goes back to the Marvel universe. Up until Thanos, the one villain that they got some like praise for was Loki. But Loki full shifted
hero,
something like,
that's a good way to put it. Yeah.
So he didn't really stay on the villain side. And then the last one that I wrote is Koba from Dawn of the Planet of the Apes. He's the villainous ape.
Yep.
And kind of a great, again, contrast, the opposite of the hero. Whereas Caesar was raised by a kind human, and so he still has like faith and belief in humans. Koba was raised in a lab getting tested on, and he hates humans because they're mean and cruel.
That's a great one.
But you like get that motivation, and then as they're, it comes to a battle between the two, you understand Koba, but you're like, man, he's scary, and you want him to stop because he's just wants to kill all the humans, and then it just makes a great villainous ape.
I'd also just to real quick shout out the villains in Air Bud 2 Golden Receiver. No, I'm just kidding. We just haven't talked about Air Bud in a while.
That is what those movies are lacking, though. I think
they just don't have that
a villainous.
They need their Thanos.
Yeah. Just a Rottweiler who's out there fouling the other dog.
Those movies are so close to perfection, and they just can't quite land the plane on the. No, I'm just kidding.
The Thanos of the Air Bud.
Thanos of the Air Buds. That's what's really missing, Or just put Thanos in the Air Bud movies. Problem solved.
There it is.
That's why I'm a genius. No. So I'm going to put you on the spot. When you were making your list, did you find something that's like, what is that one quality of a great? Did anything jump out? Like, what truly does make a great villain, or what? Like, to me, what I kind of find is like when I think about my villains, I find that I do like the. Like, kind of like the Thanos-like villains where it's like, I know they're the bad guy, and I don't really see their point, but like 0.6% of me kind of understands where they're coming from.
No, I'm definitely with you. I think it is sort of that relatability of, if I were to go full villain,
There you go.
that's the kind of full villain I would be.
Yes,
Yeah.
there's something to that, as opposed to just like I just want to kill everybody because I'm the bad guy.
Yeah. And, it goes back to the Hans Gruber of like,
Yeah.
I couldn't be the big, but could I mastermind,
For
I
$600 million
couldn't, but it's that type of deal. Everybody in the back of mind kind of wants to know, could they pull off a bank heist?
Yeah.
We're
Yeah.
not going to do it, but we just want to know, could we? You know?
Or you watch Hans Gruber and you're like, oh, that was a really good idea. If I was gonna do this, I would take that idea.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think
So like the villain with just even if, like I said, it's like 0.1% of oh, that's a good, not relatability, but kind of I kind of sort of in a weird way see where he's coming from.
And again, it's usually almost a mirror of heroic things. It's taking the skills and the things that heroes use to win, and it's just using them to win on the other side.
Mm-hmm.
When you watch a guy, you're like, oh man, that guy really uses his cunning really well. I like that villain. Or that guy really uses even his strength. Ivan Drago uses the same tools Rocky uses. He just uses them as a villain.
Yeah.
And even Joker, there's that little element of if you're going to be a madman who's having way too much fun with his madness.
And setting piles of money on fire.
Yeah.
And then I think, you just kind of, you see that when the hero and the villain both work, Dark Knight's a good example. I'm invested in the Bruce Wayne and Batman character, and the Joker's awesome. That's what can take a movie from good to great.
Yes.
Terminator 2 is a good example. T-1000 and then Arnold's T-800 Terminator character. Two awesome characters, and it's just let them, whether it's physically or the mental chess game, just let them go at it.
Yeah.
And that always produces a great movie.
Yeah. And I was saying at the beginning, not all my favorite movies have great villains, because you either have to be really invested in just your hero winning, which is most movies, or you have to be really invested in your villain losing, and the great movies have both.
Both. Yep.
And it'll lead me to my final shout out, which is we talk about movies on this podcast. We are a movie themed podcast, but sometimes, we watch great television. And one of my favorite villains from television is in Game of Thrones. It's Ramsay Bolton, who is this just wretched little character. And he is the ultimate, I just want this guy to get his comeuppance. Yep. I want him to lose so badly. And it leads to my favorite episode of the whole series, which is the Battle of the Bastards. It's Jon Snow and Ramsay Bolton. It's called the Battle of the Bastards because they're both bastard sons. And in that episode, it's I just want Jon Snow to win, and I just want Ramsay Bolton to lose so badly. Yeah. And then the conflict comes, and it's so satisfying when Jon beats Ramsay Bolton, and it's a great satisfying hero versus villain encounter.
And a lot of times, even if movies have complex ideas and stuff, when you can boil them down to just a simple hero beats a villain, that works for a reason. It's worked for 100 years. It'll keep working for 100 years when done correctly.
Yeah. I think I said last thing I'm going to say on the last point. I do this a lot. I notice that listening back. I'll go, last thing I'm going to say, and then I'll say
we
something
just
else.
love talking about movies, so we just keep talking.
I don't think that great villains are disappearing necessarily, but it does bother me a little bit. The trend in movies is that they don't want to portray people as just purely bad. They always want to humanize or something in some way. And of course, this is a huge trend in Disney right now as they make live action remakes. Let's take a Disney villain and give their backstory and show why they're misunderstood.
Just misunderstood.
Or yes.
They didn't get enough hugs when they were a kid.
And I'm like, stop doing that.
Stop.
Let people just be villains.
Hero versus villain works. You don't have to try and change it or water it down.
Yeah.
So I agree completely.
So I hope we continue to get great villains. I hope
so.
Years from now we can look back and be like, hey, let's do a whole nother pod on all the
great
villains.
Because there's been a lot of great villains since then.
Yeah.
Yep, I hope so too.
But until then,
that was fun.
That was a lot of fun, and we thank everybody for joining us as always.
Go watch a Carl Weathers movie this week.
That's right.
Watch a Carl Weathers performance.
Yeah, and we will see you guys again next week.